Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and welcome to the next installment in my Reading A to Z Reading Challenge wrap-up, where I am trying to read down my physical and ebook TBR via the alphabet through the course of the year, and I'm creating a little series for it. Now, those of you who are very familiar with my channel know that I read down my TBR in lots of different ways. This is just one of them. This month we are looking at books that have titles that begin with the letters Q, R, S, T and U. And I do have one letter that I've just had to admit defeat on and call a DNF as part of the wrap-up because it was the only book I had beginning with a particular letter, and the point is not to add to my TBR for the sake of this challenge, it's to read it down. So I'm not going out looking for something just for the sake of it. So at the time of filming I definitely did not have another book to fill in this spot. I may after Rare, but I'm also not willing to push this video out longer just for the sake of finding a book. We have a lovely little stack of books. You're actually technically getting a bonus book in this one because I did DNF and my little bonus does not fit in with the letters, but it does follow on from one of the books that I read. Starting with my DNF, for the letter Q, I was going to read Quiver by Guiliana Victoria, which is a hockey romance. I did not get very far into this book at all. I couldn't even tell you the premise of it because we all know I don't read synopsis of books. I didn't get far enough to be able to tell you the point of this book. I probably had it because I found it somewhere while I was looking up hockey romance books, because I just tend to grab those and then I either like them or I don't. And in this case, there was something about the writing style that I just was not vibing with the book at all. So even though I did DNF it, and I DNF'd it very early, I'm counting it as Q because I quite literally do not have a single other book, either physical or ebook, currently sitting on my TBR to cover that letter. And we're not growing the TBR for the sake of this. However, that said, for everything else, I basically used a physical book from my TBR, even if I listened to it as an audio. For the letter R, I had The Restaurant of Lost Recipes by Hisashi Kashiwai, who was the translator, translated by Jessie Kirkwood. This is another one of those cozy Japanese little stories. You have a father and daughter duo who have become food detectives, and people come to them looking for recipes from their past that they don't have access to anymore. So it could be the way a parent made something, or it could be a street food that they had when they were much younger and they haven't been able to find or replicate. And so this father-daughter duo do a lot of research. They track down people and histories and things like that to try and recreate. And they recreate this meal and then are also able to pass on the knowledge that they've learned about the history of that meal. I thought this was a really cool concept. I quite liked the story. The one thing that we don't really get is all of that research and the tracking down of things. There's a few different sort of people in the story. They always have like 4 or 5 different characters that are kind of coming in, and that's the point of the story. But what I would have loved to have seen is all of that research and the tracking down and the talking to people who are connected to this. Like with all of them, there was this incredible story, and we get retold the steps that particularly the father has taken in order to track down this recipe to be able to recreate it. But we don't get to see any of it. And I just would, for me personally, I would have liked that element as well, because then it would take it almost into historical fiction, but with a really cool kind of concept. It was really fun. It was a really nice, comfortable afternoon read. So that one's worth checking out. Like that one I would come back to over some of the other cozy little fantasy books that I've read. After that, I read Safe Haven by Shankari Chandran, which I also listened to as an audiobook. So I got the audio from Libby, and the narrator for that was Shabana Aziz, from memory. This is a contemporary story. It's about Fina, who arrives in Australia seeking asylum and ends up helping support refugees in Port Camden, which is a detention centre. But when she speaks out about how they're being treated there, she gets caught up in a media storm, and basically her status as an asylum seeker is threatened, and the Australian government is seeking to deport her. Now, alongside that, at Port Camden, a security guard has died suddenly. People are suspecting that it's murder. And so Lucky, who is a special investigator for the Australian government, is sent out to Port Camden to investigate this death. They meet Fina and they get to know Fina's story. They get to know a lot of the people who work at Port Camden, including the people who are detained there. Yeah, it's a really interesting story about displacement and people seeking refuge in a place because of circumstances that are outside of their control. It is pretty damning look, honestly, at Australia's asylum seeker and refugee policy. Like it's not great, but it's also about people who are finding home and seeking connection and kind of the lengths that you'll go to for safety for yourself, but also for the people that you love. I really like this one. I think the audiobook was a great way to read it. Although I have to admit, the first half of the book, I was a tiny bit confused because we were jumping around in perspectives and in time as we get Fina's backstory. But once we got into the main sort of mystery arc of Lucky investigating the death and Fina in the current day, I was sold and set. Then we had Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which I know is a very popular book. This is a very beautiful cover of the book that I have. This one I also listened to the audio for. It was narrated by Jennifer Kim and Julian, it's either Chihi or Sihi. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. I did not love this book, and this was always the thing with this book, that I was like, I'd been told that it was probably something I was going to like, if not love, but I would probably enjoy it. And I didn't know all that very much about it. I knew it was a story that had some romance in it, but not necessarily a romance, so I knew it wasn't a romance going into the book. On paper, I should have loved this book. It's about two people who meet when they are children. One of them is in hospital, the other is there visiting in hospital, and they connect over games, video games. And then as they grow up, they reconnect and they build video games together. They start a company together alongside another friend of theirs. But their entire life, their entire friendship is built on miscommunication and half-truths and a passion for games. And it just keeps happening over and over and over. And the romance that happens in here, which is not between the two main characters, but between one of the main characters and one of the side characters, I actually quite liked seeing that relationship develop, because that relationship developed from initially a apathy, distrust, even dislike between the female character and the male character in the relationship. However, something happened to that male character, who was the nicest guy in the entire book, like the genuine nicest guy in the book, that made me really mad. And it's not something that I always get angry or annoyed about books for, but I didn't like the way that through the whole book we're in the perspectives of Sam and Sadie. They're our two main characters, the two that constantly miscommunicate with one another, because Sam is in love with Sadie and never actually communicates that effectively with her, and Sadie ends up falling for somebody else. And then when this thing that happens, and I'm trying to be vague and not spoilery, we're suddenly shifted into the perspective of a third person as this thing is happening to them. I didn't like that as a writing style, because I understand technically, like as a technical thing, why it's impactful to switch to that person's perspective in this moment. However, we have not had their perspective for the entire book. Now, had we had their perspective for the entire book, maybe I would have felt something different. I don't know. This is very hard to talk about while being intentionally vague. Anyway, I think the writing is solid. I think the story is fine. It just didn't work for me because it did things that I don't love. And at the end of the day, that's just something that occasionally happens. So that was kind of disappointing. Oh, actually, the other thing that I will say is, of all the video games that they create, it is the final one. The one where Sam is trying to reconnect with Sadie. That was the one game that I was deeply invested in. Everything else I could take or leave. And then for you, I read Us by Sarina, Bowen and Elle Kennedy. Now, initially I had something else in place for this, and then I totally forgot that I had Us, which means I'm wrapping up a series. And so I'm also going to talk about Epic, which is the little novella that takes place after Us, because I have it as well, and I just read them both. So this is the second book in the him duology. We are following Jamie and Wes. Wes is a professional hockey player. He's in his rookie year. Jamie also had the chance to go pro, but decided to go into coaching instead, and he much prefers it. He's very happy as a coach. In this book, they are in an established relationship. They're living together, but they're having to hide their relationship because it's Wes's first year, and they've both agreed that they'll give Wes a year to get established, so that being the first out player is not the thing that is defining of his rookie year of playing. However, this starts to wear very thin very quickly for both Wes and Jamie, as they're feeling stifled by the things that they can and can't do. One of Wes's teammates moves into an apartment upstairs and is just constantly barging into their life, and at first is very unaware that Wes and Jamie are a couple. I did like Blake. He's just a big cinnamon roll who is initially oblivious, but is actually a very, very good friend for both of them. Throughout the course of the book, Jamie gets quite sick and unwell and is in hospital for quite a bit, and is on a lot of medication, and this messes with his body and the way that he's thinking about things, and eventually these two end up spending time apart because Jamie needs a break, because he's the one who is essentially putting his life on hold for Wes. And while he agreed to it, like everything in the moment is just feeling very overwhelming, and it's them having to learn how to communicate how they're feeling and what they want to get out of their relationship. They end up being outed anyway when Jamie is in hospital, and Wes is just constantly there and just needs to be there, and he's just inconsolable the fact that his partner is so unwell. So this one was a bit stressful in that sense. That's not the stuff that I love, is that having to hide who you are. Jamie's also dealing with some stuff at work. One of the other coaches is incredibly homophobic, and he's tried to talk about it before but kind of hasn't followed through in a a formal sense, and then this causes a little bit of trouble later down the track, which is another reason why Jamie ends up needing a break. But the writing is solid. It's a really fast-paced, easy read. I'm glad that I finally concluded the series. Epic. Even though this doesn't fit into the alphabet, let's talk about it here. It's just a really super short novella that is a couple of years down the track. Wes's team is playing one of the West Coast teams, and Jamie has gone traveling with the team. He's there, he's taking his family, who are also from the West Coast, to the game to watch the game. And while they're there, Jamie, who is on the NHL backup goalie list for emergencies, gets called up to play for the opposing team against Wes's team. And it's really fun. Like, it's just his first time playing in the NHL. As a backup, he plays one period. It was super cute. Like, it was just adorable. Oh good, the lighting's changing because the sun has decided to rise above the side of the building. That means it's time to wrap this up. I technically cleared 6 books off my TBR for this video, which is lovely. I will leave a list of all the books that I've talked about down below. In the comments, I'd love to know if you've read any of them or if you're planning on picking any of them up. Feel free to let me know. I have one more installment in this video series for this year, so hopefully that will be out. At this stage, it will probably be out in December, but we shall see. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.